Okay, so what I have for you now is a little bit of an exploration of different kinds of brushes. So I'm going to mix up just one colour really here, and I'm going to make a nice little watery heap of it. I'm going to try out some of these different brushes and I'm going to talk to you about them. This is a spotter brush. This is a number 5. It's my go-to brush for a lot of my painting. Now you can see that it's got quite a short end from the tip to here, and that gives you quite a lot of control. You can, even though it's a big brush, you can do some quite fine lines. If you press it flat and then release, you can get these fun petal shapes. You can also use the very tip and you can get, even with the number 5, some quite fine dashes. You can also get textures and you've got a lot of control. Next one I've got is what I call a long round. You can see this is much longer from the tip to here, and when we're using this, there's different ways of holding it. If I hold it near the end, you can see I can get a very fine line. I can also kind of press down and get different rolly shapes here, and I can get pulled shapes. If I hold it closer, a little bit more like a pencil, I get quite a lot of control. I can do very fine marks. I can press and release and get petal shapes again. I can press and release and get a bigger petal shape. Press and release and get a small kind of dash. I can get kind of really loose circles. And I can do a line that kind of goes thin and then goes thick and then goes thin and thick, a little bit like brush lettering. That's a long round, and that one's a size 2, which is the smallest I've got. Next up, this very big brush, which is a cat's tongue. I'm giving it a bit of a wet and then I'm drying off the water so I can pick up some of the paint here. Now this is a very big brush, but you can see if I can get enough paint on it, press and release, press and release, and you can get kind of petal shapes. You can practice with those and get some really lovely kind of petal shapes and put them together if you like flower and floral patterns. You can also use that very tip to get fine kind of squiggly lines, and you can use the side to press and release. This one's actually a 3/4 inch, so it is very big, what I'm using. This brush is a fan brush. It's a number 2 fan brush. I'm just going to pick up. Now, one of the things with fan brushes is they've got quite separated bristles, so you can see here that if I pull up, I can have some quite fun textures can be created. Just going to create a little bit more paint for myself here. A little bit more water in there. So I can pull up, I can twist, I can leave kind of prints in my brush. Lots of fun things I can do and have a play with one of those. Next up, I think I'm going to go for a filbert, which is one that has this curvy round shape. Now with these, get a little bit more water on there, that's better. They're really good for doing kind of circles and ovals and getting a nice smooth kind of edge to them. You can also press, and you can press and release, and you can leave these lovely shapes of varying length, so you can see how you can have some great fun with one of those, some patterns that it can make. This lovely little guy is called the deer's foot stippler. And if we pick up some paint, can you see that lovely kind of dotty texture that's getting left behind? Lots of lovely fun, great for kind of foliage. Give that a wash off. Here we've got a angled flat, and it's a 3mm angle flat. I'm going to pop some paint on that. One other thing with these that you can do is you can get a really good kind of fine line. You can also use them to kind of almost just stamp and press to get dashes that are really lovely. You can make them quite even. If you do it that way, you can kind of get interesting little shapes. It works a little bit more like a flat. You can pull up like this, and again you can get some interesting lines from it. This is a bigger version of that, so if we just get a little bit more paint here, you can actually see that you can get really nice straight lines, get longer kind of printed lines. You can get some really lovely kind of shapes from it that you can play with. Again, a great one to have a little bit of a play around with. Also in here I have got this, which I think it's a foliage brush, that's what I would call it. I'm not sure if that's its proper name. It's like a flat brush, but the thick part of the bristle ends here and you get finer bristles. So if we... Watson! Come here. If we load that up with paint, and you can see, get these lovely kind of textures like grass, and depending on how much you press, you can get different effects there. Again, a lovely brush for textures and playing around. What else have we got? We've got a straightforward flat. This is quite a long flat, and it's really great for doing washes. If I get a nice bit of paint on here, you'll see if I pull along there, you get a nice flat wash, kind of one stroke. I'll make it a bit more intense so you can see it. Even that colour goes on, and then you can do the next one next to it. And the only reason you're seeing a line is because there was a line under there before. So if I go over here, you can see that I can go all the way across my page, and these are great for doing flat washes and graduated washes. But also you've got some really fantastic colours that you can fantastic kind of lines and shapes. Again, use them straight down on their thin edge and you can get this kind of thing. You can pull them, you can kind of press and get little interesting rectangles like this, and it can give you quite a good hard straight edge if you want one. Another brush that we've got in here is one that is called a rigger. Now riggers have a long kind of thin bristle. When they're wet they kind of change and become quite pointy, see? So when you put them in the paint, you can get really fantastic fine lines and outlines. You can create textures and cross hatching. You can pull them close together. You can also pull them and get kind of a different kind of line entirely. I find them a brush that I need to kind of practice with a little bit because it's hard to control such a long tip for me. We've then got this, which is called a sword liner. Just going to wet it. Now, great thing about a brush like this is its flexibility. You can, a lot of water on this, I'm just going to take a little bit of the excess off. You can get really fine lines. You can see just how fine that is. But you can also move it around. You can use the flat and kind of twist it and get ribbons and interesting shapes and textures. But in terms of the fineness of a line and the control that you can get with that tip, with a little bit of practice and play and finding just how much is the right amount of paint, you can have some really awesome fun with that. We've then got, not my finest one, this is a 5.0. This is a really fine brush. It doesn't hold very much paint, but you've got a lot of control. You can do very fine, thin. You can do very fine, thin lines. Watson, get in here! And then this one is a straightforward round. It's not a long round. It's not like a spotter where it's quite short. So it's somewhere between the two. And it's kind of a good multi-purpose brush that holds a fair bit of paint. And you can see here, it's still got a good amount of control about where it goes. You can, if you get the paint loaded on the tip correctly, touch it and make fun little circles, you can still get relatively fine lines, and you can do the press and release to make petal kind of shapes. And there's a lot of practice that you need to do to get those perfect every time, so that you're pressing and releasing, pressing and releasing, pressing and releasing, and you get an idea of how you're going to get those kind of shapes. The very last brush that I've got that I want to show you, I'm just going to turn this over, mix myself up a little bit of paint here, is my mop. Now, all of the other brushes I've shown you, some of them have hold a fair bit of paint, but none of them are like a mop brush. So I'm going to wet it, and then I'm going to just take the excess off. I've just got a cloth and I'm just dabbing it to it over here. And if you can see my paint palette, it has picked up pretty much all of that. Now this, as you can see, I've done a lovely graduated wash with that brush, going from purple to not much purple. What else can I do? Well, I can pick up colours, and by playing around, if I use the tip, I've got quite a lot of control. I can press and release. I can press and release and create petal shapes. As you can see, it's very wet and it holds a huge amount of water, so it can be very different to play with, but really fun, especially for bigger pieces of work and bigger things. So you can leave some wonderful kind of patterns and funness in there. I really like kind of getting extra blobs of water and the patterns that they leave and the lines and things like that. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to grab some of my trusty salt, and although this isn't all that intense, I think it might do some fun things for me to work on another time. So I'm just going to sprinkle some of that on top of this because it's really quite nice and wet. And there you go, those are all the brushes I have. Now, I don't use them all of the time. The ones that I go to a lot are my spotter, my long round, and my fine Pro Art brushes. But I wanted to show you a little bit of what was there. One of the things that can be really, really fun is to split your page up into shapes, maybe rectangle, squares, hexagons, and just have a go with the same colour. What marks can I make with that brush in that space, or how many different marks can I make on a page? It's a really fun way to warm up and to loosen up. And so there we have all of the brushes. I hope that was fun. Don't feel you need to have them all. I got by with a round and literally a round for a very, very, very long time, and just painted with a couple of different sizes of round. If I was going to buy brushes now, I'd probably go for the spotters and a round, because I really enjoy using the spotters and they seem to suit my style.